Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session of the Policy Matters series. We have an intimate group today, which I think actually might serve the purposes of today's session very well. So I'm very excited to hear more from all of you today. As I mentioned, this is the fourth session in a 5-part series that OCIC has had the pleasure of co-coordinating with so many incredible partners and organizations from across the country, today particularly with Rising Youth, as well as the Toronto Youth Cabinet. Before I actually hand off the stage to our presenters, I want to do a quick land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that OCIC's office sits on the unceded territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, known as Tiggeronto, or along settler lines as Toronto. The reason that I do a land acknowledgement is not just to name the Indigenous communities on whose unceded land we live, work, and play on, but actually to prompt us to reflect about how we are engaging in the spaces and the opportunities we are in a way to better ourselves in service of Indigenous self-determination and Indigenous sovereignty. So for me, really, a land acknowledgement at the beginning of a session, a webinar, an event, is a framing that invites me to very critically reflect on how can I fully and meaningfully take part in today's session to ensure that I'm taking back skills to my own community, to the Indigenous communities that live, work, and play alongside me, in order to support the fight for justice, in order to stand in solidarity with these communities. And so as you take part in today's session, I invite you to think on this question of how can you move beyond words of naming the Indigenous communities on whose land you are currently located, and move to action, take away skills from today's session that you can use to stand in the fight for social justice. So with that, it's actually my pleasure to hand it off to Kyle Kirby, who's been responsible for handling and coordinating the entire Policy Matters series, to introduce our speakers for today. Kyle, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. I guess I'll just introduce the speakers and then I'll just give you a quick overview of the event. So for today, we have Alex and Samir. Samir was born and raised in Tanzania, came to Canada as an international student to pursue a degree in economics and international development studies. And during his time at York, Samir spent a year abroad at the University of Nottingham and the London School of Economics. Following graduation, he actively volunteered with the Ontario Council for International Cooperation, and later went on to serve as a political staffer for the federal member of the parliament, developing communication material, handling constituent issues, and community outreach throughout the pandemic. Most recently, he joined the Ontario Chamber of Commerce as a policy and public affairs specialist. Outside of work, Samir has been an advocate for affordable and accessible public transportation in Toronto, driving him to his current role as the transit lead for the Toronto Youth Cabinet. In addition, Samir serves as the co-chair of the Toronto Youth Vaccination Advisory Committee, working with the team to reduce vaccination hesitancy amongst youth ages 12 to 29 in the city. Samir has previously served as an ally on the Ontario Council for International Cooperation Youth Policy Hub as an active volunteer within the Ismaili community. And then we have Alex. Him, 28, queer Acadian from New Brunswick, and is a graduate from the University of Moncton, 2021, with a specialization in sociology. He is a community organizer, youth advocate, and a social and environmental justice activist. Issues of degrowth and decolonizations are his priorities. He is also a firm believer in participatory democracy, direct action, and social and civic innovations. His Rising Youth projects were a collective garden and a community tool library. He's been involved as a partner and an alumni with Rising Youth ever since he entered the role full-time. And he loves working with engaged youth all over the country and feels inspired by the work and initiatives every day. So I guess for this session, I'll be passing off to Samir and Alex to go over some, participatory tools that could get you involved in policy advocacy. Throughout the presentation, if you feel free to ask any question by either raising your hand and turning on the mic, or even just typing into the chat, and then I'll just moderate it and bring it up to the speakers when they're free. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Samir.
I think Samir has been having some tech difficulties, and I think we lost him. But Alex, if I can we throw you in the line of fire and have you share first while Samir rejoins? Perfect.
No problem.
All right, let me just pull up your presentation. Give me a moment.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Well, I guess, first of all, thank you for that intro, Kyle. And I'd also like to thank OCIC for organizing this Youth Policy Matters series. I'd also like to thank everyone here tonight for attending this series, and for being curious people and for wanting to expand your knowledge on different issues that we're collectively facing, and yeah, for getting engaged and involved and wanting to do something about it. So thanks a lot. And I guess that's why I'm here tonight as well. I think naturally I would be in the last speaker series because I guess now that we've all thought about these social issues, so climate change, colonization, food insecurity, the next natural step is, how can we take action? So I'm really excited to be here on behalf of Rising Youth and to share our community service grant opportunities with all of you tonight, and hopefully inspire you to apply for grants and turning your ideas to action, quite literally, and becoming the change leaders that we desperately need, if we're going to tackle all these multiple and intersectional crises that we face. So you can go to the next slide. I just want to do a quick land acknowledgement as well. So let's start off with this land acknowledgement, but I also want to make it, I always try to take this moment to make it a moment of reflection and discussion rather than reading the land acknowledgement. So, because I think we can and we should consider all of this while we think about our projects tonight. We can build a project that considers intersections as well as colonialism. So it's important to reflect on whether you've asked or assumed what a certain community or group that you're trying to serve might actually need or want. And yeah, I mean, basically, if you're an outsider, what steps, have we taken to understand the community we're trying to serve? So anyways, with the Thanksgiving holiday that has just passed a couple of weeks ago, I want to first of all acknowledge the fact that colonial history is not Indigenous history. The colonial names that have been given to places on Turtle Island are a persistent reinforcement of the notion that this land and its peoples, they didn't exist prior to the arrival of colonialists. So that recognition of Indigenous land names, for example, is also a recognition of the histories and cultures that have preceded colonization. And more importantly, it recognizes that these histories and cultures continue today. So think of the recognition of land as a recognition of truth. And remember that without truth, there's no reconciliation. Because reconciliation is a healing process that requires public sharing of the truth, as well as constructive actions to redress past harms and ongoing legacy of colonialism. So yeah, I think we all need to do more than just talk about reconciliation. We can learn how to practice reconciliation in our daily lives and, you know, within our activist organizations or community projects as well. So yeah, I think there's just a link, Whose Land. It's a really good resource to know how to do your own land acknowledgements. So you know, it's there. We can put it in the chat as well. But before I continue with today's presentation, I just want to say that, you know, doing all of this, you know, practicing reconciliation, what it does is it reintroduces Indigenous perspectives into modern society. And this is something that we desperately need if we're going to tackle these most urgent crises, you know, that humanity has ever faced. So, you know, decolonization or land back, these are the most efficient and practical ways to combat climate change. Colonialism, you know, cause climate change, and Indigenous rights are the solution. Although, you know, Indigenous peoples only own or occupy 25% of the world's surface area, they safeguard 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. So, you know, the knowledge of regenerative and sustainable agriculture and agroforestry, these are all associated with traditional Indigenous knowledge. So once again, Indigenous rights, knowledge, and values should be central to any green project. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. I know I can be a little much when it comes to climate action and food security and decolonization, but these are all things that I'm personally very passionate about. But remember that action is the antidote to despair, which finally brings me to Rising Youth. So Rising Youth, who are we? Basically, we offer non-competitive community service grants to youth from 15 to 30 years old. What non-competitive means is basically that if you apply for one of our grants, you'll get it. And you'll get the money within 2 weeks. So if you're ready to take action after all these, you know, series that we've just seen, well, we're ready to break that financial barrier for you, and so that you can get going and become the change leader that you are. So we can go to the next slide. So these are the 3 levels of grant that we offer. Basically, as long as your project is not for personal profit, there is equal value and opportunity in all of these levels. So this means the impact you can have from a $250 grant is as important as the impact you can have for a $1,500 grant. So we can go to the next slide. The types of projects that we accept are pretty much limitless. So yeah, click. In every case, you identify a problem and you bring a solution. Some of your projects will require more resource or materials, so you could apply for one of the bigger grants. But yeah, as I said, we really accept all sorts of projects. Just to name a few, we've seen multiple community garden projects for, you know, the category. We've seen as well courses with newcomers. For health, we've seen personal protective kits for essential workers, tree planting events for environment, conferences and workshops on diversity and inclusion and social justice, basketball tournaments, queer proms, drag shows, care packages for people experiencing homelessness as well, and some, you know, shared knowledge libraries about resources on whatever the youth is passionate about. So, you know, it can be a feminist library, climate action library. So yeah, so many amazing projects that I would love to see you add your ideas to, and to diversify this pool of projects even more with your unique touches and ideas. So that's something that I love about this project. Actually, you can go to the next slide, but I'm just gonna ramble on a bit. So what I love about this program is the general role of grants in the advocacy sphere is that we see you as experts in your own communities. So, you know, it's not this small town French boy from New Brunswick that's gonna, you know, tell you how to run your project in downtown Toronto. All right. So like, we really do see you as the experts, and because you bring local perspectives to global issues, national issues. So, you know, also with the network that Rising Youth offers our alumni, you can connect with youth from all over the country that, you know, are trying to tackle issues that you're also passionate about. And nothing is stopping you from transforming this small grant opportunity to, you know, transforming it into like a global movement or its own entire organization. As we've seen many times, like some of the Rising Youth grants have become organizations in themselves, you know, trying to serve the communities that they started off from. So it's really, really an amazing program. So a few key requirements. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because obviously, like, we are very flexible. It's almost surprising. So, you know, we also offer support through your entire application process. So if something needs to be like modified or changed for it to be accepted, we're going to work with you on that. So it's still good to get familiar with our checklist before applying, but we'll get back to that later in the presentation. So yeah, as long as your mission is in line with our key mandates, which is youth leadership, community benefit, and volunteerism, you should be okay. We're all good with that. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. I'm gonna start talking faster. I think my time is so. Yeah, what's next? Basically, first of all, it's gonna be like the ideation part of the project, I guess. So really building your idea, your project, designing your project. So just a few reflections or questions to ask yourself if you're feeling a little stuck, like on finding an idea. You know, just ask yourself, why am I applying for a grant? What's my mission? Like, what's bothering me? What do I want to change? And then ask yourself, you know, once you figured that out, ask yourself what you can do about it. So, you know, I'll give you examples later, but and once you have an idea of how you can address that issue, you're gonna ask yourself, what do I need? What are my resources to get this done? So I guess we can skip a few slides and I'll talk about a concrete example for you guys. Yeah, okay, actually that slide was fine with the garden. Thanks. Yeah, so basically this was my Rising Youth project, and I just wanted to kind of go through this little ideation, like reflection that I just talked about. So basically, my mission was to do something about climate change and food security. As I mentioned maybe 5 times, these are things that I'm very passionate about. So that's what I wanted to do. That's what I knew I wanted to do, something about climate change and food security. So when I asked myself, what can I do about it to help, you know? I thought, okay, a collective permaculture garden seems like a perfect project that would tackle these issues. So, you know, regenerating soil by planting fruit trees and plants is a great way to do something about climate change, right? and local organic sources of food are crucial in terms of food sovereignty as well. So after that, you know, I asked myself, what do I need to get this done? Like a community garden is a pretty big project and I'm just me, right? So I knew that I needed to find community members, neighbors, friends who hold some knowledge or at least some interest in gardening. So one of the first steps that I did was just to get these people together and start talking about, you know, started talking and making to-do lists and stuff like that. I remember our first meeting was in a tiny little bar on a weeknight. Like it started from nothing, and you know, there might have been 4 of us there, but that's where I needed to start. And today, you know, I'm not even living in that city anymore, and the garden is thriving through all of the volunteer efforts. As you can see, it's you know, abundance in harvest. So yeah, we can go to a couple next slides. I'm gonna skip. This was just another example of a really cool project in BC. It was like a book club on decolonizing the food system. So they would like, I believe it was like a youth-led virtual meeting space for cross-cultural dialogue between Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth to discuss the intersections between food security and food justice and decolonization. So yeah. Next slide. These are toolkits that we've prepared for projects related to call to action. So I'll share them in the chat later, maybe. So we can just move to the next one. So applying for the grant. That's after you've designed your project. Obviously, you can apply for the grant. It's really easy, flexible, and quick. Like I can't stress that enough. It's easy, flexible, and quick. You get your money within 2 weeks and you get support through the entire process. Obviously, you know, you're learning really important and life skills during that entire project as well. So the next few slides are like just snapshots of what the application looks like. So we can like quickly go through it just so you can, this is like the checklist before, yeah, and then there's a little section about talking about yourself, a tiny little section talking about your project, and like a few budget lines just to give us like a general idea of how you're going to be spending the grant. And yeah, I think that's it for me for tonight, but I've left some my email on the next slide. I'll add it in the chat as well. And yeah, I'm gonna leave you to that for tonight. So thanks for listening to me, and I guess it's to you, Samir.
Wonderful, thank you, Alex. And I do apologize for, oh, just give me one. Yeah, I do apologize for dropping out early because my Wi-Fi just threw me out. I'm also having audio issues. Just give me 1 second, sorry.
I always say it's not a virtual conference unless somebody has technical issues, you know?
Perfect. Can you guys hear me? Good. Perfect. So if we could just share your screen, if possible, Kyle, because I don't know if my Wi-Fi will give out again.
Yeah, I can do that one.
If you do have access to the presentation, otherwise I'm more than happy to do it on my end.
No, I have it. Let me just start the presentation.
Wonderful, thank you.
There you go.
Perfect, thanks, Kyle. So first off, I do want to thank everyone for making the time to join. I know it's 6:30 in the evening, and it's a Thursday, maybe not the best time to talk, but always happy to talk about policy and getting youth engaged in the political process and trying to solve issues that you're passionate about. Before I do start talking about the Toronto Youth Cabinet, I do want to everyone has spoken about Indigenous reconciliation from the beginning. And I think I'll speak from my own experience that as an international student, I did not know the history of Canada. I think this summer has been a huge learning opportunity for me and millions of other Canadians. I take every opportunity I can to learn and unlearn everything that I can. There is of course a free course from the University of Alberta that if you are interested in taking, you should. It's something that I'm working on right now, just to learn about Canada's history with Indigenous people. Talking about the TYC, the Youth Cabinet. If we could go to the next slide, and the next slide. I do not look like I do in that picture. It was taken pre-pandemic. My hair has grown since. But the Toronto Youth Cabinet is the City of Toronto's official youth advisory board. It was formed just over 20 years ago by city councillors who are very much very NDP leaning. They were very progressive and they understood the need to have youth voices at the table at City Council. If you live, work, or study in Toronto, you are eligible to join. You do have to be between the ages of 13 to 24. If you are turning 25 in the next year and you're still 24, you're more than welcome to join. This is something that I found. While I was in school, I always sought out opportunities to engage in policy. I did Model UN and public speaking and debate and all those things, but never really got the chance to engage in the political process, whether it be partisan or non-partisan. So after graduating, I found the TYC. I engaged more during the pandemic because I realized that local issues matter. And I found that I had knowledge that other bureaucrats or other politicians didn't have. At the time I did start, I was working for the federal member of parliament, so I did have some more local knowledge from my own particular ward. Next slide. So the whole point of the TYC is exactly that, making sure that youth voices are at the table. It's of course been a challenge during the pandemic to engage. Everyone's been we've had to find very new and innovative ways to engage. Previously, we'd be able to book meetings with city councillors, sometimes even with the mayor, people at the premier's office, and talk to them about issues that we're passionate about. But unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's limited our ability. But because things have gotten virtual, it has also opened up opportunities for us. And I think this is maybe the silver lining of the pandemic. This isn't going away. It's going to be easier for us to engage with politicians and keep them accountable, but also keep in touch with them and make sure that what we ask for, they do. Next slide. So the TYC is of course it's consider it a body of city council. We're all non-elected. We're all volunteers. We do not get paid. I serve as the transit working group lead, and there are a number of other working groups. If you are interested in any, there's budget. There's of course transit, community safety, education. They're all listed there. And we all work as a team to, of course, highlight the issues that we face in our wards, but also the issues that youth in particular face in the City of Toronto, to our municipal representatives, our provincial representatives, And I think now we've understood that engaging at the federal level is of the highest importance. Before I even started getting engaged in politics or the political process, I often used to think that each body of government, municipal, provincial, federal, they all work independently. There isn't much happening between the three. But then municipalities are very much a product of the province. The city of Toronto, for example, would not run without funding from the province, and the province would not run without money from the taxpayer and the federal government. So we've understood recently that engaging with the federal government on youth issues as a whole that affect youth nationally, things like education and skill trades, homelessness, these are things that, or housing affordability rather, these are things that we would engage with them. So all three levels of government we engage with on the same issues. Next slide. So with regards to our engagement with the City of Toronto, this is something that is a bit of a challenge when it comes to engaging at the municipal level. Unfortunately, the city continues to use this process called TIMIS. It's an archaic website where you will find information on government meetings, consultations, and most of the time we find the time to go out and engage and do deputations and speak to issues. But this poses a challenge to a number of youth, especially those who do not have access to computers or smartphones or Wi-Fi and internet at home. That's something we saw during the pandemic. Kids didn't have computers and they needed to get them from the province or from the TDSB. And because of this, it does limit access. But because we have gone virtual, we can easily, from the comfort of our own homes, jump onto WebEx, speak on an issue for a minute and leave. We would not have to go into City Hall, wait for 2 hours for our speaking spot and then leave. So it's a benefit, it's a good and bad. But we continue to tell the city that they need to create forums that are more accessible to the youth, while also further engaging in person. Next slide. Perfect. We could even go to the next. These are all the working groups within our council cabinet. Perfect. So we do have about 10 different working groups, but all of us work on large advocacy issues together. So you may have seen this on the news last week or the week before. One of the things that we've been advocating for almost a year or two was access to menstrual products in school, because we understand that period poverty is real. It is true that there are some schools that were already doing it. They were already providing menstrual products for free, but the province later went on to guarantee that. That was the TSB and the Catholic District School Board, and now that's going to happen for sure. A few weeks ago, we had, just tell me if you hear me, because my internet is not stable.
We lost you for a moment, but then we got you back. We can hear you now.
I cannot hear you. Okay, good. Sorry. Yeah, so a few weeks ago, this is the other piece of advocacy. This has been very much in the works. For almost 2 years, we've been trying to get the province to introduce financial literacy into the school curriculum. And we understand that even now, during the pandemic, everyone was talking about buying stock and buying Bitcoin, but no one really understands all those things. We don't understand savings accounts, RSPs, TFSAs. These are things that they just fly over our heads. And as an international student or as a young person as a whole, these aren't things that I think I would have sought out if I was 15, 16. But it's after so much engagement, they finally brought it in. Next slide, please. So the transit working group is, I joined the transit working group as the lead in December of 2020. And we primarily work on transit issues. It's in the name. So making sure that it is more affordable, accessible, while also ensuring that every project more projects are being introduced across the city and the province to also decarbonize our roads. I think when I think about transit, I see it as a source of employment, as a way for people to get to jobs, for kids to get to school, but also for communities to build around. Recently, if you've been living under a rock, this may be breaking news to you, but Eglinton has been under construction for almost 10 years. And that is something that, of course, we have continued to advocate on. Now there's that the province is doing with Line 5, the Ontario line. And this is something that we do not have shovels in the ground yet, but we continue to advocate on, especially when it comes to ensuring that access is made available to communities that are still transit poor. So folks in Flemington Park and Thorncliffe, they do have access to transit, but the investments that are being made over there will do more harm than good. I won't go into it too much, frequent. And that is something that, of course, we're upset by. It doesn't make sense why the province does that, but we continue to advocate on and tell the province to consider other options. So how else are we engaging? I think that.
Samir, we lost you again.
Again, the pandemic has made it slightly easier for us to engage because we can go virtual. Anika, can you hear me? Because it froze.
Yeah, we lost you. Maybe just for a minute, you can try turning off your video. Let's see if that helps.
Can you hear me now? Perfect. Where did you lose?
Right as soon as you started this slide.
How are we engaging? Okay, perfect. So with regards to engagement, it's only gotten easier during the pandemic because everything is virtual. So doing deputations in City Hall, I personally have not, because of conflict with the work. I would not necessarily be able to go out and speak on a policy issue, but members of my team have gone to City Hall through WebEx and spoken out for a minute on particular transit investments. We're fortunate as well as the TYC to be on the radar for the TTC, the YRT. So they reach out to us and seek out advice and our own knowledge. I think for anyone who's young and just considering getting into the policy space, I think you need to recognize that you come in with your own knowledge that is extremely valuable, and it has to be heard. Oftentimes we'll have folks who sit around a table and do not have an understanding of the community's needs, challenges, weaknesses. You, your friends, your colleagues, your parents, and people in your community, those stories are very much crucial to making sure that even a train station is built in the right place, or a bus lane is prioritized over cars. The other stuff that we do is, if you could go to the next slide, Kyle, is social media engagement. We have a huge following across the city. I think our mailing list has maybe around 5,000 youth. Some of them likely are alumni of the TYC, But social media engagements is huge. We try to push people to engage in surveys and get their voices heard. Recently, I personally think we pay too much for transit. I think all of us can agree. We pay the most for transit in all of Canada. Our transit system is also the least subsidized by the province. In Quebec, it's almost 2/3 subsidized. In Ontario, it's almost 25%. It's slightly ridiculous that we pay so much, and because of the pandemic, we've seen that the revenues that the TTC, for example, has received have hit historic lows. So now they're considering increasing their rates. I think they're too high. We know that they're too high, and we are just voicing that we need to reduce fares to get people back on the move. So that is what we're doing there. We are also attending a number of so this is one of the letters that we wrote to City Hall with regards to Young Tomorrow. There are a number, like I said, we're fortunate to be within the TYC, so the city and other agencies and other stakeholders will reach out to us and ask for advice on particular transit investments. Young Tomorrow is a huge undertaking. There's Young Tomorrow and another project that is further up north on Young. These are investments that will, of course, help communities. They'll decarbonize. They will support people pedestrians, cyclists, and also ensure that transit is more accessible. There are other consultations that I personally join on behalf of TYC, including the one on line 6, the Ontario line, investments that are taking place in the East End with regards to housing. So speaking out on housing issues and how that links to transit. And the last thing that we're doing right now is soon we are going to be launching a survey for youth within the City of Toronto to complete, asking about their opinions on transit, issues around access and cost, the effect that COVID has had on transit, or their transit use, and what they think the city and the province should do in the future. Next slide. Challenges. So for youth who engage in any type of, or even I face this time, I think the biggest advice I can give to anyone is find an issue that you're passionate about and run with it. For me, it's transit, because I see transit as a housing issue. Transit is a climate issue. It's an employment issue. It has links to so many other pockets of our own lives that I find it as it's very much at the core. So try doing that. The other thing is political apathy. I think for a lot of us, we look at politicians and we often think of them as bureaucrats who just get employed. They run in an election every 4 years or every 2 years in the case of a federal government, in a minority. But we often have this thought that politicians don't care. They don't really want to do much. So we don't engage. We don't talk to them. We don't tell them what the issues are. The other issue is other barriers to entry. So there's scheduling issues. Let's say City Hall is sitting from 1 p.m. on a Wednesday all the way until 4. It's impossible for a university student who, for example, studies at York, and they have lectures or they have exams, or you have students who are studying in Thorncliffe or Flemington Park, they need to bus there after school. Chances of them being able to speak out and engage close to zero. So COVID has made it easier because now you can easily join on your phone, turn your camera and mic on, speak and leave. But then there are other issues, like a lot of jargon being used in meetings that flies over the heads of youth. I sometimes sit in meetings and I'm thinking, why are we talking about so nitty-gritty details of infrastructure development? Why aren't we talking about what will it what are the effects of those investments? To know who's going to be using that sidewalk. Is it accessible? Is it going to be year-round accessible? Are you going to be plowing on it? Those kind of questions. And then the last thing I think is finding other people who are passionate about the work that you're doing. Oftentimes, like if you're interested in transit, you will think that you're very much alone in that issue. But there are communities out there who are passionate about those issues. So seek them out. If you're interested in transit or housing or employment, join the TYC. We're always looking for members. It's an excellent place to engage in the policy process in a non-partisan space. We've got people on all sides of the political spectrum with different ideas, and we're always happy to listen. And I think for the last slide, for how you can engage, and this is mainly with regards to if you want to engage on a particular issue that's close to your heart, and you just want to reach out to an elected official. So having worked for a federal member of parliament, I think the best practice to reaching out to a federal member is understand the issue that you want to engage in, and also be willing to give time to making meetings with your member, writing letters, and when you do get to that stage, you write that first letter and email. Keep it short. Talk about yourself, introduce yourself, introduce the issue, send an email. You can even send a letter to your member of parliament. It's completely free. It blows my mind that in Canada, you can email any one of 338 members across the country, and it'll be delivered without postage. So you can do that. Write about your issue. If you have a pamphlet or a one-pager on the issue, attach that. Most members of parliament are always interested in listening to what the issue is. And when you do that, you want to always follow up. Email that member and ask, did you receive my email? Did you receive my letter? And most times it's a stopper like I was looking at that. And if they're keen enough, they will make time and they will push their member to book an appointment. Politicians at the end of the day do want to look good, but they also do want to make sure they're representing the electorate. So make sure you're able to do that. And I think when you do that, most select jurisdiction issue, if you talk about transit, they'll say that, oh, this isn't for us, it's more municipal. But you need to be able to stand your ground and understand that any issue that is municipal or provincial is a federal issue, and any federal issue has an impact at the municipal and provincial issue. So stand your ground, understand the issue, and be patient, and understand that most elected officials have a 10-minute attention span. Talk to them short and let them pontificate and lecture you on what they have done and their accomplishments, but also push back and question their action. I feel like I've spoken a lot. Unless we can just go to the last slide. There's a quick QR code over there if you are interested in joining any of the working groups within the TYC. Transit is out there. All of our email addresses are there. You can always follow me myself on Twitter. I try to tweet as much as I can. And of course, LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk more about political engagement in a non-partisan sense, or even a partisan sense. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you both. Thank you for both coming to speak. I definitely learned a lot. Even as someone who just is doing a little messless Mondays with my own group, I think I learned a lot of how to community organize and even write for grants, and I guess progress that to be more of a impact within my own community. So thank you so much for sharing and teaching me more about what I can do. I guess I will open the floor quickly to anyone who has questions or insights, reflections even. Feel free to drop in the chat, unmute your mic, turn on your camera. Go ahead. Should that go? Yeah.
So close to Tabdi. It's a lot of consonants. This was a really great presentation from both of you. I had a question from Samir. I'm always really curious about the advocacy process. That's one of the reasons why I joined OCIC and wanted to learn more. I was wondering if you could speak to sort of specifically how you go from like identifying a community need and like how do you do that to all the steps of advocacy to like an actual end result, whether that works in your favor or not. But I was just wondering if you could speak to the process a bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, just let me know, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've never had to ask that many times. Today has been a very bad day with the internet, so I do apologize. So I think, of course, the first step is identify the issue. Sometimes it can be very broad, like in Toronto, transit is a generally large issue. But if you do want to make sure that action is taken, I think try to look at the issue from a grand scale and distill it down to the local level. Look at it through a neighborhood lens, because most politicians, like your own politician, would be more interested in understanding what the issue is at a particular intersection, for example. They wouldn't really be thinking about any other area. And the reason I say that as well is there's a lot of political calculus that that politicians are also thinking about at the same time. So let's say, for example, like in Thorncliffe, Flemington Park, if you've lived around that area, you know that it's a melting pot of people. We've got immigrants, you've got people from all around the world. So for one of the issues that you could identify through transit is language. Bus stops are all in English. They do not have the stop signs. The maps do not have the names in English. You could easily say that in this particular neighborhood or these particular stops, we could try to make that a bit more accessible to people who either speak or read in Urdu or Gujarati or Arabic or be what may. And then you bring that to your politician. I think the other thing that you can do is, if it's not something that your politician could help with, is identify other political actors that you could reach out to, or other actors who are not in the political realm. So if it's transit, you want to reach out to someone within the TTC, and it's difficult. It's not easy to even reach out to someone who's in charge of stakeholder relations, because most people have a lot of things going on at the same time. And I think especially since we started working virtually, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like the workload has grown. So we often forget, I don't want to say we often forget, it's just that priorities change. So you want to reach out to people who are in charge of stakeholder relations. And if you find that one person, just keep in touch with them, keep poking and prodding. Ask for a meeting, ask for a call. If you can see them in person, do that. And then when it comes to engaging it politically, I think the easiest thing is recognize, like, take that neighborhood issue, bring it up to your elected official, but don't go alone. Do not go alone. Always go with someone else who can speak to the issue. And also you don't want it to be a lot of word vomit. You want to keep it very simple. 5 to 10 minutes, explain what the issue is. And for the rest of the time, talk about solutions. Try to come with a piece of paper prepared with notes for yourself and notes for your elected member, and leave it with them. If you're fortunate enough, some of these members will actually take that paper and they will speak to it in their respective committee, be it municipal, provincial, federal. most elected people are in those positions, and that's really when you start seeing action, when it's brought up in committee. So if it's transit, for example, it could be brought up in infrastructure at the provincial level, and you just want to keep on poking and prodding. Poking and prodding it takes time. Politicians hate it because we see the emails and we're just like, oh, this person just keeps emailing. But then we realize that they're passionate about the issue. They're voters at the end of the day, and the issue exists and it has to be solved. I think if it's a complicated issue, you need to also give it time. And if it's an issue that requires a monetary contribution, it's going to take even longer. So if it can be done for free, it'll be done quicker. Like that's very much the sad reality. But if it's a big enough issue that you identify, I think any politician would jump on it. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that did. Thank you so much.
Well, I guess there is a question in the chat. I can direct it towards Alex if he is still there. From an
Yeah, here.
Perfect. What was that aha moment for you that spurred you to take action on these topics? Ash, like, what made you passionate about being involved?
Yeah, so I don't think there was an aha moment for me, honestly. I wish there was one and my answer would be more interesting, but I think it was more so of like years of kind of generalized but not specific, like anxiety about things that I just hated that were happening around me or not happening, like climate action and stuff like that. So I think I just finally, maybe there was like one thing that I saw that was like too much, and that just finally made me start getting involved. And that's when I think I was just probably afraid of getting involved because I wasn't an expert or a pro in anything. So I was afraid to like speak up and stuff like that. But once you get involved, you really realize that there's a whole community there with you to like back you up and to help you out. And it doesn't really matter at all if you're not, have a doctorate in climate science. You can definitely get involved and your voice 100% matters, and your experiences and perspectives can really help the movement as well. So yeah, I think that's it.
Great. No, thank you. That was a good answer. I guess I could just give it to Samir for same question. Yeah.
Do you mind just repeating the question?
Yeah,
I'm just literally reading the chat now.
That's fine. So what was that aha moment for you that spurred you to take action on these topics, / what made you passionate about being involved in your community?
Personally, it was the 2019 federal election. I think as an outsider, like I still consider myself very much an outsider. I think many of us do when we think about politics. 2019 was a challenging year as a whole. I was looking for work, and everyone's like, "Oh, just volunteer on a campaign and you'll find someone who you can, or find a particular party or a person who identifies or understands the issues that you're passionate about." Or it'll be an opportunity for you to learn about the issues and find one that you end up being passionate about. So I started engaging then, and then I realized, like, I was in a room, like the day we opened our campaign office, I was the youngest person in the room by maybe 30 or 40 years, no joke. I was the youngest person there, and throughout, like even our campaign team, no one was there, and I was the youngest person there. They quickly threw me into leadership. They're like, "Okay, you're young, you understand social media, so here you go." And then I realized that politicians or policymakers as a whole want the youth voice there. It's not that they're creating barriers. You just need to be willing to seek them out. And me being in that campaign office for, I think the writ period for that one was about 40 days, made me realize that there's a deficit of young people in policy, but there are plenty of young people who are passionate about issues. So I took that and I ran. It was great working for a politician and also engaging with the issues and engaging with community and learning more about what their issues are. So I think for anyone, like whatever party you identify with, or even if you don't, find a person that identifies with the issues and has solutions similar to the ones you want to be seen, and go out and support them. I'm not saying support any particular party, but support that person before the party.
Thank you for answering the question, and I guess just thank you overall for just maybe igniting some sort of flame and getting people to change their passion and ideas into action. So thank you for speaking, and thank you for answering the questions. I'll pass it off to Anika for closings.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samir and Alex, for, of course, making the time and sharing your wisdom and expertise. It's such an honor to have folks like you in our network to be able to, pass off your wisdom, and also to reflect on your own journeys in this space. You are youth like the target audience of our Policy Matters series, and because of that, it is inspiring to kind of hear it from people who have gone through this process at the same stage or slightly ahead of the rest of us in this stage of our journey, whatever that journey may be. So to all of you that were able to join this very intimate gathering today, it was, I hope that you were able to take away some new knowledge or a new mindset or motivation on topics that may have been at the back of your mind. Similar to what Alex said, it doesn't have to be an aha moment. It could be this building concern and interest for social issues in your community. And I know with Kyle's support, we've been able to highlight a handful of them over the past few Policy Matters sessions, but that's not the be all end all. You are the experts in your own community on the topics of relevance to your own community. And I hope that you will take this time and this moment in the midst of everything else that's going on to take action in your community. Before we close, I'm just going to launch a very short poll. It's only 6 questions long, and I invite you all to just take 1 or 2 minutes to respond to that. I will just kind of give you folks a couple of minutes to respond before we close for the evening. Just a reminder, these poll questions are completely anonymous, will not impact your engagement with Policy Matters or the Youth Policymakers Hub, and will not be publicly shared. This is just for OCIC's internal reporting and our own reflection and improvement of our current and future programs. So this is really helpful feedback for us as we strive to deliver strong and relevant programming. And also, it's always just nice to see what you folks are thinking about the initiatives that we have the honor of supporting and collaborating on. I'll just give folks another 30 seconds. I see a couple more responses are still pending. Amazing. So feel free to continue to respond. But with that, it's actually my pleasure to once again thank Alex Arsenault and Samir Jan Mohammed for your time and your energy in holding the space. It is my pleasure to wrap up today's session from ideas to action. If you haven't already, please do take a look at the fifth and final session of the Policy Matters series, which will be the hackathon happening on November 6th and 7th. You'll have an opportunity to spend a week with other young people just like you in a participatory exercise to hack a policy related to one of the issues that we've been covering during Policy Matters, as well as a couple of other issues, including Vote 16 and nuclear disarmament. If this is of interest to you, or if you just want to get your hands dirty on developing policy, please do feel free to take a look at our Eventbrite, the link for which one of my colleagues will drop in the chat, and register for the hackathon as soon as possible. But with that, it is my pleasure to close today's session. Thank you all for joining, and I look forward to seeing you folks at the hackathon in a couple of weeks. Thanks, folks.